front door clicked shut behind me, the sound echoing in a house that felt too quiet, too empty, yet somehow too full. I was home, or what used to be home. My name's Cora, and I'm 21. I'd just come back from my mother's funeral, my brain still a fuzzy mess of grief and exhaustion. All I wanted was my bed, my room, the familiar comfort of my own space. I dragged my suitcase down the hall, my footsteps heavy. The door to my old room, the one I'd had since I was 5, was ajar. I pushed it open and my breath hitched. The walls were painted a sickly beige, my posters were gone, and my beloved antique dresser was nowhere in sight. Instead, sprawled across what used to be my mattress, now just a bare mattress on the floor, was Jamie. He was 19, my new stepbrother and Vivian's son. He looked up, a smirk spreading across his face. "Oh, hey, Cora," he drawled, not bothering to move. "Looking for something? This is my room now." My jaw tightened. My bed, the one my mum and I had picked out together, was gone. Just a bare mattress, and Jamie looking like he owned the place, which, apparently, he did. My father, Nicholas, walked in then, Vivian trailing behind him, her smile a little too wide. "Cora, honey, you're back," he said, his voice flat. He was 48, and since Mum died, he'd changed, or maybe he'd always been this way, and I was just seeing it clearly now. "We had to make some adjustments. Jamie needed a proper space. Your bed, well, it was time for it to go. Part of setting priorities and growing up, you know." Vivian, 46, stepped forward, placing a hand on my arm. Her touch felt cold. "We're so sorry, darling, but family priorities, you understand. We've set up a cosy spot for you in the living room. It's temporary, of course." Temporary meant the pull-out couch, or in my case, a thin sleeping bag on the floor next to it. I was an outsider in my own home, relegated to the floor while my stepbrother gloated from my childhood bed. Jamie started calling me Maid Junior almost immediately, laughing whenever he sent me to fetch him a soda. The resentment simmered, a low, constant burn under my grief. That night, trying to sleep on the hard floor, I heard their voices from the kitchen, Nicholas and Vivian. "We need to access her trust fund, Nicholas," Vivian whispered, her voice sharp. "It's the only way to cover this family emergency." My trust fund? What were they talking about? The whispers about my trust fund kept me awake that night. The next morning, the family emergency seemed to translate into a sudden surge of household chores, all conveniently landing on my plate. Jamie, still lounging on my old mattress, would bark orders from his phone. "Maid Junior, get me a glass of water." Or, "Did you finish the laundry? My jeans aren't dry yet." Vivian, meanwhile, hovered, scrutinizing every dust particle I missed, every dish I washed. "Are you sure that's clean, Cora? We have standards here." My father, Nicholas, was a ghost in his own home. He'd nod vaguely at Vivian's complaints about my supposed lack of effort, or offer a weak, "Cora, just do what your stepmother asks." He barely looked at me, his eyes always drifting to Vivian, as if seeking approval. The wedge between us grew thicker each day, a silent, suffocating wall. I felt discarded, replaced, like an old piece of furniture no longer needed. A few days later, my cousin Amber showed up, a welcome burst of familiar energy in the stifling house. She's 23, always been my rock. She hugged me tight, then pulled back, her eyes scanning the living room floor where my sleeping bag lay. "Cora, what is going on?" she demanded, her voice low. I told her everything: the room, Jamie, the chores, the overheard conversation about the trust. Amber's brow furrowed. "Your mom was meticulous about your future. You know that. That trust fund is serious money. You need to protect it. Vivian smells opportunity, I'm telling you." Just as we were talking, Vivian called me into the dining room. Nicholas was there, looking uncomfortable. On the table were some official-looking documents. "Cora, darling," Vivian purred, gesturing to the papers. We have some urgent medical bills from your mother's final treatments. Very unexpected. Nicholas and I have decided the best way to handle it is to access a small portion of your trust. It's a formality, really. Just sign here." My heart pounded. Medical bills? My mum's insurance covered everything. This felt wrong. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the pen. "It's for the family, Cora," Nicholas said, his voice strained. "Just sign it." I mumbled something about needing to read it thoroughly, buying myself time. Later that evening, while I was trying to make sense of the vague forms, Amber, who was helping me sort through some mail that had piled up, suddenly froze. She held up a crisp white envelope. "Cora, what's this?" "It's from the bank, addressed to you. It says, 'Trust opening appointment confirmation for tomorrow morning.' But you never told me you scheduled an appointment." "An appointment? I didn't schedule anything," I said, taking the envelope from Amber. The date was for this morning, just an hour from now. It was clearly a setup. They wanted me to sign those papers, and this appointment was their way of making it official, with a bank manager present. "You have to go," Amber urged, her eyes wide. "But don't sign anything, just listen. See what they're up to." So, an hour later, I found myself sitting in a quiet office at the bank, Nicholas and Vivian flanking me like two over-eager guardians. Nicholas looked uncomfortable, fidgeting with his tie. Vivian, however, was all smiles and composure. Across the polished desk sat Margaret Swanson, the family's longtime bank manager. She was 56, and I'd known her since I was a little girl, always seeing her at family gatherings or when my mum handled finances. Today, though, she seemed different. Her usual calm demeanour was replaced by a subtle nervousness, her eyes darting between me and Vivian. Vivian launched into her practice speech about the urgent medical bills and the necessity of accessing my trust. "Cora understands, of course," she said, beaming at Margaret. "She's a sensible girl. Just a few signatures, and we can put this unpleasantness behind us." Margaret pushed a stack of papers towards me. My hand trembled as I reached for the pen. This felt like a trap, a betrayal. I remembered Amber's words. "Don't sign anything." I need a moment," I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. "I'm not feeling well." As I pushed my chair back, Margaret extended her hand across the desk, ostensibly to offer comfort. Her grip was firm, and as her fingers brushed mine, I felt a small folded piece of paper press into my palm. I quickly tucked it into my sleeve, hoping no one noticed. "Perhaps we should reschedule," Margaret said, her voice surprisingly steady, despite the nervous tremor I'd noticed earlier. "Cora looks quite pale." Nicholas, ever eager to avoid conflict, readily agreed. Vivian, though, narrowed her eyes at me, a flicker of suspicion in their depth. I feigned a dizzy spell, stood up abruptly, and practically fled the office, leaving them to sort out the rescheduling. Once outside, away from their watchful eyes, I pulled out the note. My heart hammered against my ribs as I unfolded the tiny square of paper. In Margaret's neat handwriting, it read, "Trust Clause 18B has been triggered. See me privately. Do not sign anything." My mind raced. Clause 18B, what did that even mean? I pulled out my phone, my fingers flying as I searched for information about my mother's trust, specifically looking for any mention of clauses, especially one that sounded so ominous. It didn't take long to find the legal documents online. As I scrolled, my eyes landed on a section about betrayal and family loyalty. This was far more complicated than I ever imagined. The betrayal and family loyalty clauses I found online were vague, written in dense legal jargon, but the implications were chilling. My mum, always so shrewd, had clearly anticipated something like this. I needed to see Margaret, and I needed to do it without Nicholas or Vivian knowing. That night, after everyone else was asleep, I slipped out of the house. I'd texted Margaret. asking if she could meet me somewhere discreet. She'd suggested a diner on the edge of town, one that was open late and usually quiet. The moment I saw her, hunched over a coffee cup in a dimly lit booth, I knew she was my only hope. "Thank you for meeting me," I whispered, sliding into the seat opposite her. Margaret nodded, her face etched with concern. "Your mother was a very wise woman, Cora. She foresaw certain possibilities." She pushed a folder across the table. "Vivienne and your father have been trying to access your trust for weeks. They submitted forged documents claiming you had given them power of attorney. They even tried to schedule this appointment themselves, hoping you'd just sign without reading." My blood ran cold. Forged documents, my own father. "Clause 18b," Margaret continued, her voice low, "is a safeguard your mother insisted upon. It states that if any attempt is made to access the trust through fraudulent means, or without your explicit informed consent, the trust automatically locks. All power over the assets, including the ability to disburse funds or change beneficiaries, then transfers exclusively to you, the primary beneficiary, with immediate effect. It also triggers a full legal review, which is what the appointment was really for, to confirm the fraud and transfer control." She showed me copies of emails, forged signatures, and a detailed paper trail of Vivienne and Nicholas's attempts. The medical bills had been a lie, a flimsy excuse to get my signature. They hadn't needed my consent for medical bills. They needed it to unlock the trust they'd already tried to steal. "So what does this mean?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "It means they have no access to the trust, and they never will," Margaret explained. "And now you have full control. You can do whatever you deem necessary with the assets. Your mother wanted to ensure you were always protected, always had a safety net, especially if things went south with your father after her passing." I felt a strange mix of emotions, shock, anger, but also a surge of power. My mother, even in death, had protected me. The next morning, I called Amber. She listened, her usual boisterous energy subdued by the gravity of the situation. "Cora," she said, her voice firm, "this isn't just about money. This is about them trying to take everything from you. What are you going to do?" I looked around the living room, at my sleeping bag on the floor, at the silence where my mother's laughter used to be. A plan, cold and sharp, began to form in my mind. "I'm going to make sure they regret this," I said, my voice steady. Margaret mentioned something about the house. "The house," Amber repeated, a hint of understanding in her voice. "You mean buy it?" Margaret said with the trust. "I could shift assets," I explained, the idea growing bolder in my mind. She hinted that I could buy the house outright. "It was my mother's home, Amber. She loved this place, and they tried to take everything." My first call was to Grant Hanson, the family lawyer who handled my mother's estate. He was 35, usually very reserved. I laid out the entire story, providing him with the evidence Margaret had given me. At first he was hesitant, clearly uncomfortable with the family drama. But as I detailed the forged documents and Vivienne's blatant manipulation, his professional demeanour hardened. He reviewed the trust's clauses, confirmed Margaret's interpretation, and agreed to represent me. Back at the house, Vivienne and Nicholas were practically giddy. They seemed to believe I had signed the papers, or that I would soon. Jamie, oblivious as ever, strutted around taunting me. "Heard we're going to be rich, Maid Junior. Maybe I'll buy myself a new car. You can clean it for me." He'd laugh, a smug, entitled sound that grated on my nerves. I just nodded, a small secret smile playing on my lips. Let them celebrate. I worked with Grant in secret, moving quickly. The house, I learned, was still technically in my father's name, but my mother had ensured a significant portion of its value was tied to her estate, and thus, indirectly, to my trust. With the trust now fully under my control, I had the means. Grant helped me put in a discreet cash offer, well above market value, leveraging the power of my newly secured funds. It was a bold move, but it felt right. This house wasn't just a building. It held every memory of my mother, every happy moment before grief and betrayal had tainted it. I remembered her teaching me to bake in the kitchen, her laughter echoing through these very halls. This wasn't just revenge, it was reclaiming a part of her, a part of myself. A few days later, a realtor's car pulled up to the house. I watched from the living room window as a woman in a suit walked up to the front door, a serious expression on her face. Nicholas answered. I couldn't hear what was said, but I saw the colour drain from his face as she handed him a document. Vivian rushed to his side, snatching the paper. Her eyes scanned it, then widened in disbelief. They looked utterly blind-sided. My phone buzzed. It was Grant. "Cora," he said, his voice quiet, "your offer was accepted. It was the highest bid. The house is yours." The silence that followed Grant's call was deafening. I walked into the dining room, where Nicholas and Vivian stood frozen, the legal notice from the realtor clutched in Vivian's hand. Jamie, who had been playing a game on his phone, looked up, sensing the shift in the air. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice whiny. I looked at them, my father who had abandoned me, the woman who had tried to steal from me, and the boy who had mocked my grief. My voice was calm, steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside me. "The house has been sold to me." Vivian's face contorted. "What? That's impossible! Nicholas, what is she talking about?" Nicholas, pale and shaken, could only stammer, "Cora, what have you done?" I held up the formal notice from Grant, crisp and white. "This is a notice to vacate," I said, my voice steady. "Effective immediately. You have 24 hours to leave the premises. The sale is final. Your offer to buy it back was rejected, and if you're not out by this time tomorrow, Grant will initiate formal eviction proceedings." Nicholas exploded. 24 hours? Cora, this is vindictive, ungrateful, after everything we've done for you." "Everything you've done for me?" I scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "You gave away my bed, let your son mock me, and then tried to steal my inheritance to cover your own family emergency, which, by the way, I know was a lie. You forged my signature. You tried to leave me with nothing." Vivian stepped forward, her eyes blazing. "You can't do this. We'll contest it. We'll fight you in court." "You can try," I said, my voice cold. "But the trust clause is ironclad, and Margaret has all the proof of your fraud. Grant Hanson is my lawyer now. You have no legal standing here. This house is mine." Jamie, who had been listening with growing horror, finally spoke up. "Cora, please, don't do this. I'll give you back your room. I'll do chores. I'll stop calling you Maid Junior." He looked genuinely panicked, his entitled facade cracking. I looked at him, remembering the endless taunts, the way he'd revelled in my misery. "It's a little late for that, Jamie. You made your bed, literally. Now you can lie in it, just not here." A wave of conflicting emotions washed over me. There was vindication, a powerful sense of justice served. But beneath it, a profound sadness. This wasn't just about money or a house. It was about the complete destruction of what little family I had left. Nicholas, my father, stood there, looking at me like a stranger, like an enemy. The man who was supposed to protect me had betrayed me. As they started to scramble, pulling out suitcases, Vivian paused, her eyes fixed on mine. "You think you've won, Cora? Fine, but don't think for a second this is over. I know things about your mother, things about your father, things that could ruin everything you think you have." Her voice was a low, venomous hiss. The 24 hours passed in a blur of shouting, slamming doors, and the dragging of suitcases. I stayed in the living room, a silent observer to their frantic exodus. Nicholas was red-faced. Vivian spitting venomous remarks under her breath. Jamie cried, begging his mother to do something. But by the deadline they were gone. The house suddenly was quiet, eerily so. I walked into what used to be my bedroom, now just a bare beige box. Jamie had taken his mattress, leaving behind only dust and the faint smell of stale energy drinks. I closed the door, a sense of quiet triumph settling over me. This was mine again. My first act was to buy paint, not beige, not white, but a deep calming blue. I spent the next few hours painting, each stroke a deliberate act of reclamation. The blue covered the blandness, a fresh start. I was halfway through the second coat when I heard a desperate pounding on the front door. I ignored it. It continued, louder, more frantic. I knew it was Jamie. He must have realized they truly had nowhere to go, or perhaps he just couldn't believe I'd actually follow through. He called my name, his voice thick with tears. "Cora, please, let me in. I have nowhere to go." My heart ached, a sharp, unexpected pang. But then I remembered the maid junior taunts, the smug smirk, the way he'd lounged on my bed while I slept on the floor. I steeled myself. I walked to the front door, not to open it, but to ensure it was locked. I heard his frustrated cry, then the sound of retreating footsteps. My phone rang. It was Nicholas. I almost didn't answer, but something compelled me. "Cora," his voice was tight with fury, "you will regret this. You think you've won. You've destroyed your family. You'll be alone. You'll regret this. I swear it." He hung up before I could respond. Alone. The word hung in the air, heavy and cold. I finished painting, exhausted but resolute. As I put away the last brush, my eyes fell on the old built-in closet, the one with the creaky door. My mother used to hide little notes for me in there. On a whim, I opened it, running my hand along the back wall. My fingers brushed against something taped to the wood. It was a small, sealed envelope, addressed to me in my mother's familiar handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. It was a letter dated just a few weeks before she died. "My dearest Cora," it began, "if you are reading this, it means you have faced a difficult truth. Life will test your strength, especially when those closest to you disappoint. Remember your worth, remember the love we shared, and never let anyone diminish your light or take what is rightfully yours. Stand strong, my girl. You are braver than you know. Love, Mum." Tears streamed down my face, not of sadness, but of a profound, bittersweet understanding. She had known. She had prepared me. I had secured my finances, my home, and most importantly, my sense of self. I was free. The next morning, a thick envelope arrived via courier. My stomach clenched as I saw the law firm's logo. It was a legal notice. Vivian Lane Jensen was contesting the eviction in court. The court date arrived a few weeks later. Vivian, true to her word, had filed a challenge, claiming the sale was fraudulent and that I had manipulated Nicholas. Grant, however, was prepared. He presented the forged documents, Margaret's detailed records, and the ironclad clauses of my mother's trust. Nicholas sat beside Vivian, his face a mask of shame and resentment. Jamie wasn't there. The judge listened patiently, reviewing the evidence. It didn't take long. The ruling came swiftly and decisively, in my favour. The sale was upheld, the trust clauses confirmed, and Vivian's claims dismissed. She and Nicholas were left with nothing. Their attempts to access my inheritance and their subsequent legal challenge, having stripped them of what little they had. They left the courtroom in stunned silence, their faces grim. Amber helped me settle into the house over the next few days. We moved my old furniture back into my room, bought new pieces for the rest of the house, slowly making it feel like home again, truly mine this time. But even with the familiar objects, the house felt different, quieter. The echoes of my mother's laughter were still there, but so were the ghosts of betrayal. I had won, but at a cost. The family I had, however fractured, was gone. Justice felt cold, a hollow victory in the quiet rooms. I spent a lot of time reflecting, sitting in my newly painted blue room, looking out the window. What did justice truly mean? Was it worth the loneliness? My mother's letter was tucked safely in my bedside drawer, a constant reminder. She had protected me, armed me for this fight. She had shown me what real love was, not the conditional, self-serving kind I'd received from my father and Vivienne, but a fierce, unwavering protection. A few days after the court ruling, Margaret visited. She brought a small potted plant, a housewarming gift. "I knew you had it in you, Cora," she said, her eyes warm with pride. "Your mother would be so proud." We talked for a long time, about my mum, about the future. It was comforting to have an ally, someone who understood. I stood at my bedroom window later that evening, looking out at the familiar street. The house was mine. My finances were secure. I was free. But the world felt bigger, more dangerous, and I was acutely aware of how alone I truly was. I had power now, hard-won power. The question was, who would I choose to become with it? A few days after Margaret's visit, a plain white envelope arrived in the mail. No return address. Inside, a